The morning sky above Haven's Edge turned dark at exactly 0600 hours. Mira was working her usual shift in the communications tower when the sensors started screaming. She stared at her screen, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. 12 massive shapes had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly above the colony. Ships, alien ships. Each one was 3 times the size of the largest human vessel she had ever seen. Her hands shook as she reached for the emergency broadcast button. Within minutes, every screen in the colony displayed the same terrifying image. The ships hung in orbit, like dark mountains, blocking out the sun. Their hulls were covered in strange symbols that seemed to pulse with red light. Tay sat in his office when the alert came through. He was a tired man with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. For 20 years, he had managed this colony, dealing with crop failures, equipment breakdowns, and the occasional dispute between neighbors. He had never expected this. He stood up slowly and walked to his window. Even from the ground, he could see the ships as dark spots against the blue sky. The communication came an hour later. Every screen in the colony flickered and showed a face that was definitely not human. The creature had 4 eyes, arranged in a square pattern on its face. Its skin was the color of old leather, and when it spoke, its mouth revealed rows of sharp teeth. "Humans of Haven's Edge," the alien said. Its voice was translated into something the colonists could understand, but it still sounded wrong, like metal scraping against stone. "I am Commander Vrek of the Krell Dominion. You have 48 hours to surrender your colony. Gather all your people in the central square. Prepare to board our ships. You will be processed and assigned to work camps. If you resist, we will destroy every building and every living thing on this planet. We have done this 47 times before. Compliance is your only option." The screen went black. Tay stood in the colony's council chamber 2 hours later. Around the table sat the other leaders. Hana, who managed all the farms and greenhouses, sat with her arms crossed. Wu, the maintenance chief, stared at the table with an unreadable expression. Ki, the oldest farmer in the colony, stroked his white beard. Sora, who ran the school, looked pale but calm. "Can we call for help?" someone asked. Mira, who had been invited to the emergency meeting, shook her head. "I sent distress signals to every human colony and military outpost within range. The closest military ship is 3 weeks away. Commercial vessels could get here in 10 days at best. We have 48 hours. Then we surrender," one council member said. "We have no choice. We're farmers and teachers, not soldiers. We have 8,000 people here, including 2,000 children. We can't fight 12 warships." Tay looked around the table. He saw fear in most faces, but in a few, he saw something else. Something old and buried, deep. "Can we fight?" he asked quietly. The room fell silent. Wu looked up slowly. His eyes met Tay's across the table. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Wu nodded once. Just barely. "We need to talk," Wu said. "Privately. Just the old-timers." The council chamber cleared until only 7 people remained. The youngest was 40 years old. The oldest was Ki, at 68. Tay locked the door. "All right," he said. "Say what needs to be said." Wu stood up and walked to the window. This colony wasn't just a farming project. We all know that. Most of us came here to get away from Earth, to get away from the wars. The unification wars ended 30 years ago. But some of us still see them every time we close our eyes. Quote, Hana spoke next. "I designed siege defense systems for the European coalition. I came here to grow food instead of building walls. But I remember how to do both." Ki cleared his throat. "I commanded tactical operations in the Pacific Theater. Retired with full honors. Came here because I was tired of ordering young people to die. But those aliens just gave us 2 days to watch our grandchildren get loaded onto slave ships." One by one, the others spoke. Every person in that room had a past they had tried to leave behind. Soldiers, engineers, tacticians, pilots. They had come to Haven's Edge to find peace. Now peace had found its end. The weapons caches, Tay said. They're still sealed? Checked them myself last month. Wu confirmed. Climate-controlled storage. Everything should still function. We kept them, just in case. Guess this is the case. The tunnel system? Tay asked. Complete? Hana said. We told everyone it was for emergency weather shelters. It connects every major building and extends 3 kilometers beyond the settlement perimeter. 20 exits hidden in the farmland. Sora pulled out a datapad. I can have the children evacuated to the deep shelters within 6 hours. They won't see what's coming. What about the young people? Key asked. The ones born here who never saw war. They need to know what we're planning. Tay nodded. We tell everyone the truth. All of it. Then we let them choose. Anyone who wants to surrender can do so. We won't force anyone to fight. And if they all want to fight? Wu asked. Then we show these Krell bastards what humans do when you threaten their children. The meeting lasted another hour. Plans were made. Resources were counted. Old skills were remembered. When the door finally opened, the 7 who walked out looked different than the 7 who had walked in. They stood straighter. Their eyes were harder. Tay called a colony-wide assembly for sunset. Every person in Haven's Edge gathered in the central square. He stood on the platform and told them everything. He told them about the ultimatum. He told them that help would not arrive in time. He told them about the hidden weapons and the tunnels, and the truth about who their leaders used to be. We came here for peace, he said. But if we must fight for it, then we will fight. If you want to surrender, that door is open. No judgment. No shame. But if you want to resist, then we start tonight. In the crowd, Mira stood with her parents. She was 24 and had never known war. She had been born on a transport ship and grew up under Haven's Edge's warm sun. But as she listened to Tay speak, she felt something wake up inside her. Around her, thousands of colonists made their choice. Old farmers remembered forgotten skills. Parents thought of their children. Teachers became students of war once more. That night, as the Krell ships hung in orbit, Haven's Edge transformed. Greenhouse panels were removed and repurposed. Mining equipment was modified. Irrigation systems were drained and refilled with different liquids. In hidden workshops, old weapons were cleaned and tested. And deep underground, in a secured communication room, Mira sent one final message. Not to the military. Not to nearby colonies. She used an old frequency that most people had forgotten existed. A veterans network from the war that had ended 3 decades ago. The message was simple. Haven's Edge needs you. Krell invasion. Send anyone who can fight. She encrypted it and launched it into space, knowing it might reach no one, or it might reach exactly the right people. Above them, the Krell ships waited. Commander Vrek was confident. 47 other species had surrendered when faced with his fleet. Humans would be no different. He had no idea what was waiting for him below. 24 hours had passed since the Krell ultimatum. The colony looked the same from orbit, but everything had changed below. Wu stood in Warehouse 7, watching as young colonists carefully opened sealed containers that had not been touched in decades. Inside were weapons wrapped in protective plastic, rifles, plasma cutters modified for combat, electromagnetic pulse grenades. Everything still worked. Wu had made sure of that during his monthly inspections that no one else knew about. Sir, why did we keep all this if we came here for peace? Asked Young, a 17-year-old boy who had volunteered to help despite his mother's tears. Wu picked up a rifle and checked its power cell. Because peace is only real when you have the strength to defend it. We hoped we would never need these. But hope is not a strategy. Across the colony, Hana stood in the main agricultural dome with a team of engineers. They were staring at blueprints displayed on a holographic projector. The plans showed the colony's irrigation system, but Hana was pointing to modifications she had designed 30 years ago and never thought she would need. The main pipes can handle corrosive chemicals, she explained. We told everyone it was for fertilizer distribution. That was true, but I also designed it so we could pump other things through the system if necessary. See these valve clusters? We can target specific zones, flood them with chemicals that will burn through organic matter. A young engineer named Bo looked uncomfortable. You mean we can weaponize the entire farm? The entire colony, Hana corrected. Every irrigation line, every sprinkler system, every greenhouse vent. This colony was designed to be defended from the very beginning. In the colony's medical center, Dong was training volunteers in emergency combat medicine. He had been a trauma surgeon during the war, working in field hospitals where the wounded arrived faster than he could save them. He had come to Haven's Edge to heal livestock and treat minor injuries. Now he was teaching farmers how to stop arterial bleeding and treat plasma burns. The Krell are bigger and stronger than us, he told his students. But biology is biology. They have vital organs. They bleed. They feel pain. If you can't save someone, at least make sure they don't suffer. And remember, staying alive to help the next person is more important than dying with the current one. Mira sat in the communications center with Sora, learning things they did not teach in school. Sora had commanded a frigate squadron during the war. She knew electronic warfare, sensor jamming, and communication interception. For 20 years, she had taught children how to read and write. Now she was teaching Mira how to blind an enemy. The Krell will send drones to scout before they land troops, Sora explained, her fingers moving across multiple screens. We can't stop the drones, but we can confuse them. I'm setting up electromagnetic interference patterns. Their sensors will show empty buildings and ghost readings. By the time they realize what's real and what's not, we'll be ready. Night fell over Haven's Edge. In the central square, where Tay had spoken the night before, Key stood with a group of 40 colonists, ranging from age 16 to 70. They sat in a circle while Key used a stick to draw in the dirt. The Krell fight like they always win, Key said. Because they always have won. They use overwhelming force and expect immediate surrender. They have doctrine, which means they follow patterns. Patterns can be predicted. Predictions can be exploited. He drew 3 circles in the dirt. They'll land here, here, and here. Standard encirclement strategy. They'll expect us to be in the buildings, waiting to surrender. Instead, we'll be in the tunnels. They'll walk into an empty town. And then we'll teach them why humans survived the unification wars. One of the colonists, a middle-aged woman named G, raised her hand. Sir, I used to work in hydroponics. Before that, I was a sniper. I haven't held a rifle in 20 years. What if I can't do it anymore? Key looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. Gee, you remember how to grow tomatoes, right? Even though you do it every day, you still remember your first tomato plant. You remember because some things live in your muscles, not your mind. Shooting is the same. Your body remembers. It's like riding a bicycle. A very deadly bicycle. Despite the tension, a few people smiled. Key nodded. Good. Keep that. We'll need humor in what's coming. It's the only thing that keeps you sane when everything else is insane. Underground, in the tunnel system, workers moved supplies and equipment, food, water, medical supplies, ammunition. Everything needed to survive a siege. The tunnels had been dug over 20 years, slowly and carefully. The official reason was protection from the severe storms that hit Haven's Edge every few years. The real reason was now obvious. Tay walked through the tunnels with a young engineer who was mapping the final defensive positions. With 8,000 people? 3 months if we ration carefully. Maybe 4. But sir, if we're down here for 3 months, that means the surface is gone. Better the surface than the people, Tay said quietly. In one of the larger tunnel chambers, Wu was conducting training. Colonists who had never held weapons were learning basic combat skills. Not enough to make them soldiers, but enough to keep them alive. You don't need to be a warrior, Wu told them. You need to be alive. Stay low. Move fast. When you shoot, aim for center mass. Don't think. Don't hesitate. The Krell will kill you without a second thought. You need to do the same. A young man raised his hand. Sir, is it true you were special operations during the war? Wu stopped moving. For a moment, he looked very old and very tired. Yes. I did things I'm not proud of. Things that needed to be done but left scars. I came here to forget, but the universe doesn't let you forget. It just waits until you're comfortable, and then it reminds you who you really are. As midnight approached, Tay stood on the roof of the administration building with Hana, Wu, Ki, and Sora. They watched the Krell ships overhead, dark shapes blocking the stars. We were supposed to be done with this, Hana said quietly. We paid our dues, we earned our peace. Peace is not earned, Ki replied. It's borrowed, and the universe always collects. 12 ships, Wu muttered. Probably 2,000 troops minimum. Heavy weapons. Air support. Orbital bombardment capability. We have 8,000 civilians, a few hundred old soldiers, and farm equipment. You forgot something, Tay said. What? We have home advantage. They're coming to our ground, our tunnels, our traps, and we have something they don't. What's that? Sora asked. Tay smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had seen war and survived it. We have nothing to lose. They're fighting for conquest. We're fighting for our children. That makes all the difference. Far above, in the command ship, Commander Vrek reviewed the scans of the colony. Everything looked normal. Buildings were intact. Power signatures indicated normal activity. The humans would probably gather in the central square tomorrow morning, ready to surrender like all the others. His tactical officer approached. Commander, we're detecting some unusual electromagnetic readings from the colony. Interference patterns. Probably their primitive communication systems panicking, Vrek said dismissively. Ignore it. By tomorrow, they'll be in chains, and this planet will be ours. Humans are weak. They barely survived their own planetary unification. They're no threat to the Krell Dominion. The tactical officer nodded and returned to his station. None of them noticed the small, encrypted signal that had left the planet hours earlier, racing through space on an old military frequency. None of them saw it bounce through 3 relay stations and finally reach its destination. And none of them knew that 37 ships had just changed course, all heading toward Haven's Edge. Ships owned by people who had received one simple message: veterans needed, come if you can. On the ground, in the tunnels beneath Haven's Edge, 8,000 people prepared for war. Parents kissed their children goodnight and then went to check their weapons. Teachers reviewed attack plans instead of lesson plans. Farmers sharpened tools that were never meant for farming. Mira sat in her station, monitoring the Krell ships. Beside her was a photograph of her parents when they first arrived at Haven's Edge. They looked happy, peaceful. She wondered if they would ever look that way again. 24 hours remained until the ultimatum expired. The Krell expected surrender. They were going to get something very different. In Warehouse 7, Wu loaded the last rifle and handed it to Young. Remember, he said, you're not a soldier. You're a colonist defending his home. That's better than being a soldier. Soldiers fight because they're ordered to. You'll fight because you choose to. Never forget the difference. Young nodded, gripping the rifle with hands that would rather hold farming tools. But his eyes were steady. Whatever happened tomorrow, Haven's Edge would not surrender quietly. Above them, the Krell ships waited. Below them, Humanity prepared to remind the universe why humans had survived every challenge their home planet had thrown at them. The lesson was about to begin. The 48 hours ended at dawn. The Krell ships opened their launch bays right on schedule. From her position in the underground command center, Mira watched the sensors as 2,000 Krell shock troops descended toward the colony in armored drop pods. The pods fell like dark rain, spreading across 3 landing zones exactly where Key had predicted they would. "They're following standard doctrine," Key said calmly, standing beside a holographic map of the colony. "Northern landing zone, eastern zone, and southern zone. Classic encirclement. They'll march toward the center, expecting to find us huddled in the square." Tay stood at the command table, his face illuminated by the blue glow of screens. "All civilians to deep shelter?" "Confirmed," Sora replied. "All children and non-combatants are in the lowest levels. Blast doors sealed. Combat teams? In position." Wu responded from his station. 73 teams, 5 to 8 members each. Everyone knows their assignments. Well, the drop pods hit the ground with thunderous impacts that shook dust from the tunnel ceilings. On the surface, 3 areas of farmland were suddenly filled with armored alien soldiers emerging from smoking craters. The Krell troops were terrifying to look at. Each one stood over 2 meters tall, covered in thick natural armor plating that resembled dark scales. They carried weapons that crackled with energy. Their 4 eyes scanned in multiple directions at once. These were soldiers bred for conquest, enhanced through generations of genetic selection. Commander Vrek watched from his ship as his troops spread out across the colony. "Advance to the central square. Secure all structures. Find the humans. If they resist, terminate them. If they surrender, bring them to the collection points." The Northern Force, 700 Krell strong, marched through the empty farmland toward the colony buildings. Their commander, a veteran of 30 conquests, found the silence strange. Usually, there was panic, screaming, the chaos of frightened civilians. Here, there was only the sound of wind through empty streets. "Sir, the buildings appear empty," one of his officers reported. "They're hiding." Standard fear response. "Begin building-to-building search." The Krell troops entered the first row of structures. Houses, shops, storage facilities, all empty. Furniture was still in place. Food was still on tables. But no people. In the tunnel directly beneath them, Ji lay on a platform with her rifle aimed at a sensor feed. Beside her were 3 other colonists, all former soldiers, all watching different angles. They had been still for 3 hours, waiting. "Northern forces in the kill zone," she whispered into her communication device. 3 kilometers away, in the eastern tunnels, Hana's hand hovered over a control panel. "Confirmed. Execute. Protocol. 1. She pressed the button. Above ground, the irrigation system in the northern zone activated. But instead of water, pressurized chemical compounds sprayed from every hidden nozzle and pipe. The mixture hit the air and immediately began producing a dense, corrosive fog that rolled across the ground like a living thing. The Krell troops caught in the first wave started screaming. The chemicals ate through their armor, burning exposed skin. They fired their weapons blindly, hitting buildings and each other. In 30 seconds, the entire northern zone was engulfed in chemical fog. Protocol 2. Wu said calmly. Hidden charges planted in building foundations detonated. Not large enough to destroy the structures, but perfectly placed to cause them to collapse inward. 15 buildings came down simultaneously, burying Krell troops under tons of rubble. In orbit, Commander Vrek watched his tactical display as life signs in the northern zone dropped from 700 to 300 in less than a minute. "What happened?" he roared. "Report! Chemical attack!" His sensor officer stammered. "They weaponized their agricultural systems. Multiple explosions. The Northern Force is requesting immediate evacuation." In the eastern zone, the Krell troops saw what happened to the north and changed tactics. They spread out, moved carefully, checked every corner. Their discipline was excellent, but they were walking into a different kind of trap. Young crouched in a tunnel exit hidden beneath a false rock formation. He was shaking, his rifle gripped so tightly his knuckles were white. Beside him was an older colonist named Lee, who had fought in the war. "Steady," Lee whispered. "Wait for my signal. Aim for center mass. Fire 3 rounds, then move. Don't think. Just do." Through a small sensor opening, Young watched a Krell patrol pass within 5 meters of their position. There were 8 of them, their weapons ready, scanning for threats. "Now," Lee said. They emerged from the hidden door in complete silence. Lee fired first, dropping 2 Krell before they could react. Young pulled his trigger, surprised by how easy it felt. His training took over. 3 rounds into the nearest Krell. The creature fell. He moved to the next target. More shots. More falling bodies. 15 seconds later, 8 Krell troops were dead, and Young and Lee were already back in the tunnel, the hidden door sealed behind them. "Good," Lee said, reloading his weapon. "You did good. Now we move to the next position." Young looked at his hands. They were steady now. Something inside him had changed in those 15 seconds. He did not like it, but he accepted it. Across the colony, similar attacks happened again and again. Krell troops would advance, and then humans would appear from nowhere, strike, and vanish. Sometimes it was weapons fire. Sometimes it was modified mining equipment activated remotely, crushing soldiers. Sometimes it was simple traps, old-fashioned and brutally effective. In the southern zone, the Krell troops entered what looked like a warehouse. Inside were farming vehicles and storage containers. Their commander ordered a thorough search. The moment the last Krell soldier crossed the threshold, the doors sealed. Magnetic locks engaged. And then, the containers opened. They were not filled with supplies. They were filled with agricultural drones, hundreds of them, all modified with cutting lasers and explosive charges. The drones swarmed the trapped Krell like mechanical insects. The warehouse became a killing box. From her sniper position on a distant hill, G watched through her scope as the warehouse exploded from within. She felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not horror. Just the cold calculation of warfare. Target eliminated. Mission successful. Move to next position. Commander Vrek stared at his display in disbelief. In 3 hours, his force of 2,000 had been reduced to 800. His troops were pinned down, confused, and afraid. An emotion Krell soldiers were not supposed to feel. "Who are these humans?" he demanded. "This is not a civilian colony. These are trained soldiers." His intelligence officer reviewed data frantically. "Sir, records show Haven's Edge was settled 47 years ago by agricultural workers and scientists. There is no indication of military presence." "Then your records are wrong." Vrek slammed his fist on the console. "Pull back all ground forces. Prepare orbital bombardment. If we cannot conquer them, we will destroy them." In the command center, Mira's console lit up with warnings. "Sir, the Krell ships are charging weapons. Targeting solutions indicate they're going to bombard the colony." "Win the colony." Tay nodded slowly. He had expected this. "All personnel to deep shelters. Seal all surface entrances. We knew this was coming." Wei. But Key was staring at another screen, and his old face broke into a smile. "Wait. Look at this." On the long-range sensors, new contacts appeared. Ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Not Krell ships. Human ships. 37 vessels of various sizes and shapes appeared in system, spreading out in a loose formation. They were not military ships. They were civilian vessels, retrofitted with weapons, cargo haulers with missile pods, mining ships with industrial lasers, even a luxury yacht somehow carrying torpedo launchers. A communication came through on the old military frequency. A man's voice, rough and confident. Haven's Edge, this is the Defiant Wind. We got your message. Sorry, we're late. We brought some friends. Where do you need us? Mira's hands shook as she opened the channel. Defiant Wind. This is Haven's Edge. The Krell are preparing to bombard the colony. We have friendlies on the ground. End today. Thanks for watching. Copy that. We see them. Tell your people to stay down. We're going to make some noise. The human fleet accelerated toward the Krell ships. They should have been destroyed in seconds. The Krell had superior technology, better weapons, and more experience. But the humans did not fight like any enemy the Krell had faced before. They did not follow formations or tactics. They fought like individuals who knew they were going to die and decided to take as many enemies with them as possible. A mining ship accelerated to ramming speed, its crew evacuating in pods at the last second before it crashed into a Krell cruiser. The impact was spectacular. Both ships exploded. Modified cargo containers were released into orbit, each containing thousands of ball bearings and metal fragments. When they exploded, they created deadly clouds of shrapnel moving at orbital velocity. 2 Krell ships flew through the debris and were torn apart. A luxury yacht, of all things, got close enough to a Krell destroyer to launch torpedoes at point-blank range. The yacht was destroyed, but so was the destroyer. Commander Vrek watched his fleet dying around him and finally understood the truth. These humans were not like the other species he had conquered. They did not value their own lives above victory. They valued victory above their own lives. Retreat, he ordered. All ships, retreat to jump distance. The remaining Krell ships broke orbit and fled, leaving behind 800 troops on the ground with no way home. In the tunnels beneath Haven's Edge, colonists heard the news and erupted in cheers. But Tay did not cheer. He looked at the casualty reports. 200 colonists dead or wounded. 15 of the veteran ships destroyed with all hands. Victory. But victory had a price. On the surface, the battle for Haven's Edge continued into the night as colonists hunted down the abandoned Krell troops. By morning, it would be over. But for the people of Haven's Edge, the war had changed them forever. The Defiant Wind was not a beautiful ship. It was a cargo hauler that had been modified so many times that its original design was barely recognizable. Weapons, pods, hung from mounting points, meant for cargo containers. Its engines were mismatched, salvaged from 3 different ship classes. But it flew, it fought, and it had just helped save Haven's Edge. Commander Hyun stood on the bridge, looking at the debris field where the Krell fleet had been. He was 50 years old, with scars on his face and gray in his hair. He had fought in the Unification Wars, survived things that gave him nightmares, and spent the last 20 years hauling cargo across human space. When the call came through on the old veteran's frequency, he had not hesitated. Status report, he said to his first officer. Rena worked her console with quick, efficient movements. She was 33, born during the war, trained as a navigator, and one of the best pilots Hyun had ever known. We lost 15 ships in the engagement. The Krell lost 7. 4 of their ships escaped, including their command vessel. The remaining 800 Krell troops on the ground are trapped. Casualties. 300 dead from our fleet. Maybe twice that wounded. Haven's Edge reports 200 of their own lost. Hyun closed his eyes briefly. 500 dead. 500 people who answered a call for help and would never go home. Any regrets? He asked Rena. No, sir. You? Not one. Open a channel to Haven's Edge Command. A moment later, Tae's tired face appeared on the screen. Commander Hyun, thank you. Without your intervention, we would all be dead or enslaved. Don't thank me yet. We need to finish this. You still have 800 Krell on your surface. They're cut off from support, but they're dangerous. We can provide orbital support. Negative, Tae said. We'll handle the ground forces ourselves. But we could use medical support and supplies. We took heavy casualties. Understood. We're sending down aid shuttles now. And Tay? That was some impressive fighting down there. Where did a colony of farmers learn to fight like that? Tay smiled grimly. We're farmers now. But we were something else before. We came here to forget. The universe had other plans. On the surface of Haven's Edge, the hunt for the remaining Krell troops continued. The alien soldiers had scattered after their fleet retreated, breaking into small groups and trying to find defensive positions. But they were on unfamiliar terrain, surrounded by an enemy that knew every hill and valley. Wu led a team of 20 colonists through the eastern farmland. They moved in practiced formations, weapons ready. Beside him was Ji, her sniper rifle slung across her back. They had found 3 Krell groups in the past 6 hours and eliminated them all. Movement ahead, Ji whispered, pointing to a cluster of buildings that had once been grain storage. Wu signaled the team to spread out. They approached slowly, using cover. Through thermal sensors, they detected 15 Krell soldiers inside, fortified, and waiting. We can bypass them, one colonist suggested. Let them sit there until they starve. No, Wu said quietly. Every Krell soldier we leave alive is a threat. We end this today. He activated his communicator. Command, this is Team 7. We have 15 Krell holed up in Sector 4, requesting permission to use heavy weapons. Tay's voice came back. Permission granted, but be careful. Those buildings are part of our food storage system. Try not to destroy everything. 2. Wu smiled slightly. Even in war, Tay was thinking about next year's harvest. Copy that. Team 7 out. He turned to his team. Hana, we need your special mixture. Something that will convince them to come outside. Hana was monitoring from the command center, but she could control the agricultural systems remotely. Give me 2 minutes. The colonists waited, weapons trained on the building. Then, they heard a hissing sound as gas began flooding into the structure. Not the deadly chemical from before, but something different, something that made breathing difficult and eyes water but did not kill. The Krell troops burst from the building, coughing and disoriented. The colonists opened fire with precision. It was over, in seconds. 15 more Krell would never threaten anyone again. Young was with a different team, led by Ki. They had encountered a larger group of Krell, about 40 soldiers, who had fortified a position in the hills north of the colony. These Krell were more organized, led by an officer who understood tactics. This could be bad, Ki muttered, studying the position through his scanner. They have high ground, good sight lines, and they're dug in properly. If we assault directly, we'll lose half our team. So what do we do? Young asked. Ki thought for a moment, then smiled. We're farmers, right? We know this land better than they do. That hill they're on? It's Irrigation Zone 7. The water table is about 3 meters below the surface. It took Young a second to understand. We can flood them out? Better. We can undermine their position. There's a maintenance tunnel that runs right under that hill. We go below, plant some mining charges, and drop them into the ground. Then we deal with survivors. It was brutal and efficient. 2 hours later, the Krell position collapsed into a sinkhole created by carefully placed explosives. The survivors, bruised and disoriented, surrendered without fight. It was the first time any Krell had surrendered to humans. Ki looked at the captured aliens with something like pity. Put them in holding. We'll figure out what to do with prisoners later. In space, the human fleet was recovering from the battle. Medical ships from the fleet tended to wounded, while engineering teams assessed damage. Hyun moved between ships, talking to survivors, mourning the lost. He stopped at one ship, a modified mining vessel called the Stonebreaker. Its captain was a woman named Un, who had lost her right arm in the battle, but was still directing repairs. You should be in medical, Hyun told her. I will be. After my ship is secure. We lost 12 crew members, Commander. Good people. They volunteered, knowing they might not come back. I owe it to them to make sure their sacrifice meant something. It did. Haven's Edge is safe. Those 8,000 civilians, including 2,000 children, are alive because of what we did. Un nodded. Then it was worth it. But I hope we never have to do this again. I'm a miner, not a soldier. I came out here to dig rocks, not dig graves. I know. But if the call comes again, will you answer? She looked at him with tired eyes. Yes. Every time. Because that's what humans do. We take care of our own. On Haven's Edge, night fell over a changed colony. The battle was winding down. Scattered groups of Krell were still being hunted. But the outcome was no longer in doubt. The colony had survived. In the medical center, Dong worked without rest. He had been operating for 18 hours straight, treating wounded colonists, and even captured Krell. His hands shook from exhaustion, but his movements remained precise. "Doctor, you need to rest," a nurse told him. "After the next patient." "There's always another patient." Mira sat in the communications center, monitoring the last of the fighting. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep. She had been at her station for 2 days with only brief breaks, but she could not leave. Not while colonists were still in danger. A message came through from one of the orbital ships. "Haven's Edge. This is Medical Frigate Mercy. We have supplies and personnel ready to assist. Where do you need us?" "Everyone." Mira coordinated the landing, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. When the ships touched down and medical personnel began streaming out, she finally allowed herself to feel relief. They had won. Against impossible odds, Haven's Edge had survived. In his office, Tay reviewed casualty reports and damage assessments. 200 dead, 300 wounded, 17 buildings destroyed, farmland contaminated with chemicals, food stores depleted. The colony would need months to recover, but they were alive. 8,000 people who should have died or been enslaved were alive. Wu entered the office without knocking. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 2 days. "It's over. The last Krell group surrendered an hour ago. We have 140 prisoners. The rest are dead." Casualties. Final count. 212 colonists killed in action. Another 23 died from injuries. 308 wounded. Most will recover. From the fleet, 307 dead. 542 dead in total. Tay wrote the number down. He would remember every one of them. And the children? One Tay day. 542. All safe. The deep shelters worked perfectly. They barely knew what was happening above them. Tay nodded slowly. "Good. That's good. What do we do with the Krell prisoners?" Key suggests we keep them until a proper authority can take custody. We're not executioners. They surrendered, so they're protected under rules of war. We're farmers, Wu. We don't have rules of war anymore. Yes, we do. Because if we forget those rules, we become the same as the Krell. We didn't fight to become monsters. We fought to stay human. Tay looked at his old friend and nodded. "You're right. As always. Make sure the prisoners are treated according to interstellar conventions. Medical care, food, water. We'll hold them until proper authorities arrive." Over the next week, Haven's Edge began to heal. The dead were buried with full honors. The wounded recovered in makeshift hospitals, staffed by fleet medical personnel. Damaged buildings were repaired. Contaminated farmland was cleaned. The human fleet remained in orbit, helping with reconstruction. Slowly, colonists and fleet members began to know each other. Stories were shared. Friendships formed. These were people who had answered a call for help, and strangers who were grateful they came. Young worked alongside crew members from the Defiant Wind, helping repair communications equipment. He listened to their stories of the battle in space. How they knew they were outmatched, but fought anyway. How they watched friends die but kept fighting. How they would do it all again if needed. "Why did you come?" Young asked one of them. The crew member, a man not much older than Young, shrugged. "Because someone asked for help. Because humans don't abandon each other. Because if we let the Krell take one colony without a fight, they'll come for all of us eventually. Better to stand together than fall separately." In the command center, Mira finally got to meet the voice from space. Commander Hyun came planetside to coordinate with Tae. She shook his hand and found herself fighting tears. "Thank you," was all she could say. "Thank your message," Hyun replied. "You reached out to people who thought their fighting days were over. You reminded us that sometimes the war comes to you, whether you want it or not. And when it does, you have two choices: fight or die." 3 weeks after the battle, Haven's Edge held a memorial service. Every colonist and every fleet member attended. 542 names were read aloud. 542 lives given so others could live. Tae stood before them all and spoke words that would be remembered. "We came here for peace. We found war. But we did not become warriors because we loved fighting. We became warriors because we loved what we were fighting for. Our families, our homes, our future. Those who died gave everything so we could have tomorrow. We honor them by living well, by building, by growing, by refusing to let fear rule us. Haven's Edge will endure." And it did. 3 months had passed since the battle. Haven's Edge looked different now. New buildings stood where old ones had fallen. The farmland was green again, crops growing in soil that had been cleaned of contamination. But the changes went deeper than what could be seen. Young stood in a field, operating a planting machine. His hands moved automatically, the work familiar and peaceful. But on his hip, secured in a holster, was a plasma pistol. He was not the only one. Every colonist now carried weapons while they worked. Not because they wanted to, but because they had learned a hard lesson about being unprepared. Beside the field stood a new structure. It looked like a grain silo, but inside was a weapons depot, an observation post. There were 12 such structures around the colony now, disguised as normal buildings but ready for defense. Haven's Edge would never be caught unprepared again. Young's communicator beeped. It was his instructor, Lee. "Training session in 1 hour. Don't be late." The training program had been Wu and Key's idea. Every colonist, from age 15 to 70, now received regular combat training, not to make them soldiers, but to make sure they could defend themselves. The colony had voted unanimously to approve it. Even those who hated violence understood the necessity. In the medical center, Dong was conducting a very different kind of training. He taught doctors and nurses from other colonies who had come to learn from Haven's Edge's experience. His classroom was full of medical professionals who wanted to know how to treat combat injuries, how to triage during an attack, how to save lives when everything was falling apart. "The key is preparation," Dong told them. "We had supplies stockpiled. We had plans. We practiced. When the crisis came, we knew what to do. Your colonies need the same. Hope for peace, but prepare for war." One of the visiting doctors raised her hand. "But how do we convince civilian administrators to spend resources on something that might never happen?" Dong gestured to the window, where a memorial stood listing the names of the dead. "Show them that. Tell them that preparation is cheaper than funerals. Tell them that Haven's Edge survived because we were ready. Tell them the Krell are still out there, and they're not the only threat in the galaxy." In orbit, the last of the volunteer fleet was preparing to depart. The Defiant Wind would be among them. Commander Hyun stood on his bridge, looking down at the planet that had changed so many lives. "Ready to leave?" Rena asked from the navigation station. "No," Hyun admitted. "I'm never ready to leave people behind. But they don't need us anymore. They can handle themselves. Will we do this again? If another colony calls?" "Yes, every time." We proved something important here. Humans protect each other. Distance doesn't matter. We're all one species, and when one of us is threatened, all of us respond. The Krell learned that lesson. So did every other species watching. Because they had been watching. The Battle of Haven's Edge had not gone unnoticed. In the weeks following the victory, the story spread across the galaxy. Other species heard how a colony of farmers had fought off the Krell dominion. How civilian volunteers had driven away warships. How humans refused to surrender, even when defeat seemed certain. The Krell, who had conquered 47 species without significant resistance, had been defeated by farmers and cargo haulers. The message was clear. Humans were different. In the colony council chamber, Tay met with representatives from 3 other human colonies. They wanted to know everything. How Haven's Edge had prepared, what tactics worked, how to organize civilian defense forces. Tay shared it all willingly. The key is not to become a military colony, he explained. We're still farmers. We still grow food, raise families, and live peaceful lives. But we're also ready. We have plans, we have training, we have supplies, and most importantly, we have the will to defend what we've built. One representative asked, "But how do you balance normal life with constant preparation? Don't your people live in fear?" Tay shook his head. Fear is not knowing what to do when danger comes. Confidence is being prepared. Our people don't live in fear. They live with awareness. There's a difference. G was giving a demonstration to visiting militia trainers from another colony. She stood on a hillside with her rifle, explaining sniper techniques and area denial tactics, but she stopped often, her mind elsewhere. After the session, one of the trainees approached her. "Ma'am, are you all right?" "I grew tomatoes," G said quietly. "For 20 years, I grew tomatoes. I was so happy doing that. I had forgotten what it felt like to take a life. Now I remember, and I can't forget again. When I look at my plants, I see the Krell soldiers I killed. Does that ever go away?" The trainer, a veteran himself, shook his head. "No. It stays with you. But it gets easier to carry. You did what you had to do. You saved lives by taking lives. That's a burden. But it's not a sin." In the deep shelters where the children had hidden during the battle, Sora now taught a different curriculum. Her students learned reading, mathematics, and science, like always. But they also learned survival skills, emergency procedures, and basic self-defense. Not to frighten them, but to prepare them. One young student raised his hand. "Teacher Sora, my dad says we won the battle. Does that mean we're safe now?" Sora considered her answer carefully. "We're safer than we were. We learned important lessons. We prepared our home. We proved we can defend ourselves. But safe and prepared are not the same thing. We must always stay ready, always stay aware. But that doesn't mean we live in fear. It means we live with confidence." Mira had been promoted to Chief Communications Officer. She sat at her expanded station, monitoring not just Haven's Edge, but a network of colonies that now shared information. The battle had created something unexpected, a communication network between human colonies for mutual defense. Her console showed regular check-ins from 17 colonies. Not military coordination, just neighbors looking out for neighbors. If one colony spotted a threat, all colonies would know. Humans were building a system that meant no colony would ever face danger alone again. On the outskirts of the colony, Hana walked through her rebuilt greenhouses. The plants were thriving. Life continued. But the irrigation system that had saved them was now clearly marked with emergency protocols. Every settler knew that the pipes that brought water could also bring defense if needed. She stopped at a tomato plant, examining its fruit. Perfect. Healthy. Beautiful. She thought about G and wondered if her friend could ever see plants without seeing war. Hana could. She had made peace with what she had done. They had transformed tools meant for life into tools for death when necessary. Now those same tools were creating life again. That was the human way, she thought. Adapt, transform, survive, never give up. In his office, Tay reviewed reports from across human space. The story of Haven's Edge had inspired other colonies to prepare, but it had also frightened some politicians on Earth. And the core worlds, they worried about colonists becoming too independent, too militarized, too ready to handle problems without central authority. Tay sent a message to the colonial administration on Earth. It was simple and direct. We don't want independence. We don't want conflict. We just want to be able to defend our families when help is too far away. Haven's Edge proved that preparation saves lives. Every colony deserves that chance. Help us prepare, or at least don't stop us from preparing ourselves, because the universe is dangerous, and we will not be caught helpless again. The Krell prisoners had been transferred to proper authorities 2 months earlier. But before they left, their commander had asked to speak with Tay. In a secured room, the two leaders faced each other. We underestimated you, the Krell commander admitted. We saw farmers and assumed weakness. We were wrong. Why did you attack us? Tay asked. Because we could. Because we always have. Because conquest is what we do. But now I wonder if it is what we should do. You humans are unlike any species we have encountered. You do not surrender. You do not accept defeat. Even when you should die, you find a way to survive. And you do it while maintaining your humanity. You gave us medical care. You treated our wounded. You followed rules of war even when we did not. Why? Tay thought about his answer. Because we're not fighting to prove we're stronger than you. We're fighting to protect what we love. There's a difference. Strength without purpose is just violence. We use violence when we must, but we don't love it. We love our families, our homes, our peaceful lives. Violence is just the tool we use to protect those things. The Krell commander left Haven's Edge with much to think about. Across the galaxy, in the halls of the Krell High Command, the recordings of the battle were reviewed again and again. The commanders saw their forces destroyed by farmers. They saw their ships defeated by cargo haulers. They saw the impossible happen. One admiral made the decision that would change Krell policy forever. Humanity is to be avoided. Mark all human colonies as dangerous. No Krell forces are to engage humans without direct authorization from High Command. We cannot afford another Haven's Edge. End quote. It was not peace, but it was understanding. Humans had earned respect through blood and determination. On Haven's Edge, life continued. Young decided to study agriculture instead of joining any military. He would be a farmer, like his parents, but a farmer who knew how to fight if necessary. That balance felt right to him. Wu and Qi sat on a porch, watching the sunset. Two old warriors, who had hoped never to fight again, but had answered the call when needed. Do you think we'll have to do it again? Qi asked. Maybe, Wu replied. The universe is big and dangerous. But next time, if there is a next time, we'll be ready. And we won't be alone. We proved something important. We proved that humans look after each other. Distance doesn't matter. We're one species, one family. That's our strength. Upon it. In the memorial garden, new flowers bloomed around the monument listing 542 names. Families visited daily, remembering loved ones who gave everything. But the garden was not a place of sadness. It was a place of honor. Those who died had saved 8,000 lives. Their sacrifice meant something. Mira stood in the garden one evening, looking at the names. She thought about the message she had sent 3 months ago, desperately calling for help. She thought about the 37 ships that answered, knowing they might not return. She thought about colonists who became warriors to protect their children. She thought about how close they had come to losing everything. But they had not lost. They had survived. They had fought. They had won. And now, Haven's Edge stood as proof that humans would not surrender, would not give up, would not accept defeat. They would adapt, fight, and survive no matter what the universe threw at them. Young joined her in the garden. "Do you think they know?" he asked, gesturing to the names on the memorial. "Do they know that we're okay? That we're rebuilding? That their sacrifice worked?" Mira looked at the young man who had killed his first enemy just months ago and chosen to be a farmer instead of a soldier. "I think they know. And I think they're proud. Not because we became warriors, but because we stayed human even when we had to fight. We protected each other. We showed mercy to enemies. We rebuilt instead of seeking revenge. That's what they died for. Not victory, but humanity." The sun set over Haven's Edge, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. In the fields, farmers worked. In the schools, children learned. In the workshops, engineers built. Life continued, peaceful but prepared. And across the galaxy, other species watched and learned a simple lesson. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the smartest or the fastest or the most advanced. But they were the most determined, the most adaptable, the most unwilling to surrender. Haven's Edge had sent a message to the universe. The message was clear. Threaten humans at your own risk. Because they will fight, they will adapt, they will survive, and they will never, ever give up. The story of the farmers who defeated the Krell Dominion would be told for generations, not as a story of war, but as a story of what humans do when everything they love is threatened. They transform. They adapt. They become whatever they need to be to protect their own. And then, when the danger passes, they return to being farmers, teachers, parents, and friends, because that is who they truly are. The warriors are just who they become when they must. Haven's Edge endured, humanity endured, and the galaxy learned to respect both.